Hi, and welcome to Lady Talk series, season 1, episode 1. This is Katie Flaherty, CEO and founder of Shine with Courage Foundation. My mission is to promote joy and overcoming trauma. With me today, I have Amy Bliss, founder of the Warrior Core, and she is a certified sex, love, and relationship coach. She focuses on relationships with men and their sexuality, specializing with men who are survivors of sexual trauma. Hi, Amy. Thank you so much for being here and taking the time to be with me. Also, I just want to say that primarily I was only focusing on women's health, and recently God has come to me and stating that men need to be involved in my mission as well, which has been a struggle for me personally, because I've only had negative events in my life. Since recently, I've started loving myself and trusting men on a much larger scale. So God has sent me your way, Amy, and I am so blessed to have you here to interview today. Thank you for being here.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
So you just want to briefly describe anything about yourself and what you do and what your mission is?
Sure. So I had a 20 plus year corporate career in mostly male dominated fields, male dominated industries, where I thrived. I was always seen as one of, and not in spite of. And so when I left my corporate career and started my own business, my first focus was actually on female empowerment. But there was always this thought in the back of my mind of, where is this for men? Men need this too. And so that was kind of the premise behind founding the Warrior Core, which is helping men discover the man within, discover who they are as a man outside of the box that society, family, religion put them in about what a man is supposed to be. In the process, I actually became a certified coach, focusing on, as you said, sex, love, and relationships, and focusing on men, and kind of discovered in that process how many men are survivors of sexual abuse. And I have this very strong desire to help them. So that's where I spend a lot of my focus.
And when we initially spoke, I was shocked at the number of men percentage-wise. Can you share a little bit more about that on how many men on average are experiencing sexual trauma?
Yeah, so the statistics are, most of what you'll see is one in 6 to 1 in 5 is what's published. And even those people that published those studies say that that's probably too small. It's probably closer to 1 in 4, meaning 25% of men have experienced some sort of sexual trauma before the age of 18. And the main reason that this statistic is unknown is it goes largely unreported. The average time it takes for a man to report or to acknowledge sexual trauma is 20 years. Oh. And those are those that report. So not the vast majority, we don't know. A lot of men never even acknowledge that it ever happened.
That's insane. Yeah, I was shocked when you first told me.
It's amazing if you think about it. You think about the men in your life and think that 1 in 4 of them has been sexually abused at some point. And the number is smaller than women, but it doesn't lessen the fact that it happens and that it is a huge negative impact on their life.
And not off topic of our questions, but how do you feel about the Me Too movement, where it's been surrounding women in general? Right. But we all know that there must be men suffering from the Me Too movement. And I don't want to go too deep into that because I know it's a very sensitive topic.
Right.
At the same time, there are men who struggle in silence as well.
Absolutely. While sexual harassment in the workplace or in our schools and universities is largely perpetrated by men onto women, it can be perpetrated onto men as well, by both men or women. It's not just the women who have experienced this. So I thank you for bringing that up, because while the Me Too movement has been amazing in shining a light on this, because 80% or more of women have experienced this at some point in their career, but there's a significant percentage of men that have as well. And kind of like with the, with my wanting to do the Warrior Core and giving men that opportunity to shed the conditioning that they've been given in the same way that women are given permission to shed that conditioning. So it's all the things that happen to women do happen to men too. It may not be on the same scale, but it happens, and it's it has just as much, if not more, of a negative impact on their life.
And the theme that keeps happening with my nonprofit is when I first started, my main mission was to focus primarily on women and our sexual dysfunction and disorders that we experience. But every expert I ran into that have joined my foundation also brought up the fact that men are left out in the background and not focusing on them as well. And at first, I have to be honest, I was very skeptical. I was very hesitant about it because most of my background is trauma on the female side.
Yeah.
And to trust men on my own accord has been really rough in my life. Like I said earlier, it's gotten a lot better.
Yeah.
But at first I was very taken aback and I was very hesitant about adding men to my nonprofit. But the more I thought about it, I personally did not want to speak up for my own trauma, and I'm a female and we're more empowered to support one another in the female aspect. Whereas men are more solo. They suffer completely alone because I feel like men don't want to talk to each other about it,
Yep.
Even to experts. So the more I kept running into experts and my partners joining the board and my nonprofit, they all kept repeating the same theme. We really need to include men on this. So I'm very excited that I'm partnering up with you. So I just want to add that I'm being very transparent, and Shine with Courage was primarily supposed to be female health and sexual trauma and dysfunction and disorders. But I'm very excited to be adding into this aspect as well. That way we are working together as one, and men and women are equally important.
Yeah. You touched on so many things there. And first of all, thank you. Thank you so much for your honesty and your vulnerability. It's important. But there's so many things, like you said, the aspect of not trusting, that being a result of the trauma, and that men feel that too. That is one of the biggest things, is this inability to trust and be intimate with people after suffering this type of abuse. And you mentioned the support system, and one of the reasons why I'm so excited to hear that you're doing this is that the support system that is in place for female victims of sexual trauma is largely not present for men. Right. There isn't a network of organizations that are out there specifically focused on male sexual trauma. And when they do find support, or they, first of all, if they let me go back up. If they reach out, most men, when they acknowledge this, whether it's with a loved one or even with a healthcare provider, they usually encounter disbelief, shame, isolation. That can't happen to men. It couldn't have been that bad. These are the things that they hear. Or you get, oh, wow, that happened to you? God, I'm really sorry. I gotta go. And that's one of the reasons why men don't speak up, is because the few that have encountered that response, or that's the fear that that's the response they're going to get. And oftentimes it's validated. And this is true even within the healthcare providers that are there, the support system for men. Mm-hmm. We've been conditioned as a society, not just, so I talk about the conditioning of men. Men are conditioned to be strong, to not show fear, to not show weakness. They're supposed to be stoic and, the solid. And this trauma kind of flies in the face of that. And it's not just men that have that conditioning. Women have been conditioned that that's what men are supposed to be. And so when a man comes forward, whether it's to a woman or a male practitioner, there's this there is, even within the practitioners, this kind of underlying, oh, well, they're going to poo-poo it. Like, oh, maybe it probably wasn't that bad, or I'll help this person, but, really was it, so we have to overcome that conditioning ourselves. And so it's kind of this, it makes it just exponentially worse. But we don't have, as a society, the sympathy and the empathy towards male victims that we do towards female victims. And that again makes it really hard for men to open up.
That's interesting that you said that about healthcare providers, because one of my obstacles when I was struggling was finding a provider that would believe me, that I had a genuine issue and it wasn't just me being mentally ill.
Right.
I saw a few providers, at least 5 or 6 OBGYN providers, that thought I was crazy.
Mm-hmm.
They gave me a pamphlet for psychiatric help, said I needed to get help before they would see me again. And it was a very horrific experience for me. And to hear that men go through a similar experience where people don't believe them or just brush it off as
yeah
non-existent is just, I don't have any words.
Yeah, it's horrible. It's horrible. And for men, and this is not to in any way lessen the trauma of women. The trauma of women is horrible. But for men go through a lot of the same issues or the same responses, and that has the same impact on men as it does on women. But on top of it's an affront to their masculinity. There's this idea of, well, who am I as a man if I've been a victim? And if there's a lot of not just sexual dysfunction that goes on, but sexual confusion that happens as well. If a man is sexually abused by another man, which that's one of the big differences between sexual trauma in men and then with women, is sexual trauma in men generally is perpetrated by someone in authority. So it's a teacher, a coach, a scout leader, a priest, but it's definitely someone who has a position of authority over the boys or the boy in question. And interestingly, most of the men who abuse boys identify as heterosexual. So for them, it's not a latent homosexuality. It's something else. Oftentimes it's a power thing. However, the boy who is abused, if they're heterosexual, then there's this, question in their mind of, well, am I really gay? And why did this happen to me? And why did a man find me attractive? All of those questions. And if the victim turns out, or is not turns out to, but is bisexual or gay, then there's this question of, did this abuse cause me to be gay or cause me to be bi? So there's a lot of questioning and sexual confusion that happens later in life as a result of the trauma, because oftentimes it is perpetrated by men. And that's not exclusive. Women abuse men as well. And that is oftentimes a relative, a mother, a babysitter. And that has its own set of issues. But there's this idea that men will bury it or deny it because it goes against this idea that they're supposed to be strong. They're not supposed to show fear. They're not supposed to show weakness. And this is the ultimate form of, being seen as weak.
And have you ran into a lot of clients that have tried to report sexual abuse by a female, and how many were taken seriously?
Surprisingly, most of my clients never did report it. Oftentimes because it takes 20 years to even acknowledge it to another person. So they don't report it because it happened so long ago. So most of my clients are in their 30s and 40s dealing with something that happened to them as a preteen or an adolescent. And so it was so long ago that they don't report it. And as a practitioner, there's a fine line too, because just because a man has acknowledged it doesn't mean they're entirely ready to deal with it. So where women, we are naturally, the majority of us naturally, we seek help. We want to feel better. And not that men don't want to feel better, but there's so much tied up with it that you have to be, there's one of the reasons why they don't come forward is because they don't really want to deal with it, or they don't want to acknowledge it. They don't want to unpack what it means.
Right.
Or they're afraid of unpacking what it means, when it really is. One of the first things that I say to any man that comes to me is that this happened to you. This doesn't define who you are.
Right. That's what I had to learn as an individual, that just because experiences happen doesn't mean that's defining who I am as a person. And that doesn't make me any less weak than I really am.
Exactly. And oftentimes you hear that, you'll hear from people that there's this expectation that men can't be abused because they should be able to fight it off. And you'll hear that even if someone was abused when they were 3 or 4 years old. And I don't know how any 3 or 4-year-old is supposed to fight off an adult that intends them harm.
Right.
It's just ridiculous that we would even think that as a society or as individuals, but that happens. There's this sense that, well, he's a boy, he should have been able to get free. He should have been able to fight it off. So.
What impact does prior sexual trauma have on a man?
It manifests in a lot of ways. And some of these are very similar to the way it'll manifest in women. Men who have prior sexual abuse are 7 times more likely to abuse alcohol and 11 times more likely to abuse drugs, intravenous drugs especially, than those who have not. But there's a lot of things. There's isolation, anger, hypervigilance, hopelessness. There's a lot of shame around it. Obviously, it can come out in violence. While most men that are victims of sexual abuse do not abuse others, they have a tendency to be very quick to anger and to resort to violence more quickly. It's kind of a lashing out a type response. And there can be a lot of sexual dysfunction and an inability to be intimate. My first client that I had with this was this amazing man who, if you saw him walking down the street, you would never guess that there was any trauma. He was 6'2" and an amazing body and just really confident and very well spoken, and he had a beautiful wife, and you just would have thought he had everything. And it turns out he was actually sexually abused by his mom as a kid, and his wife was the first person that he was able to be intimate with without being rip-roaring drunk. He had to be completely obliterated drunk in order to have sex prior to meeting his wife. And even with his wife, there was a lot of issues with him being intimate, and he didn't want that, obviously. So it's, it can come out in a lot of ways, but there's definitely some intimacy and sexual dysfunction that can be a result as well.
Okay. And how is their experience post-trauma different from a female victim?
So a lot of times, so I think I've alluded to a lot of it, but there's this impact it has on their masculinity of who am I as a man if this happened to me. There's this questioning of sexual identity. There's also it's very isolating, and it's very isolating for women as well. But there's, like we talked about, there's support out there for her to move past it. And that support likely doesn't exist for men in their area, or they may not be aware of it. There are some really great organizations, but they're not well known. In fact, I didn't even know about them until I started doing research. When I started seeing these clients, I didn't even know that these places existed. But there's this there's this impact on them of, like I said, who am I as a man? And there's also this idea. So, wow. um, there's this idea that men can't be sexually abused because, or a man wasn't abused if they enjoyed it. And one of the things I want to do, and I apologize if there's gravitas here, but erection and orgasm are separate from consent. So men's bodies respond to sexually relevant stimuli in a different way than women's do. So just because a man or a boy was erect or had an orgasm as a result of the abuse, it doesn't mean that it was wanted or that it was consented or even appropriate. And so men will say, well, I enjoyed it, so it wasn't abuse. Or they will, they'll turn it around and convince themselves that they wanted it just to not have to deal with the idea of being a victim. And so they'll change the story, they'll deny it, they'll bury it, they'll twist it into something that it wasn't, just to deal with their own their own trauma.
What do you do and how does your work help who are survivors of sexual trauma? So we know that you have clients that are trying to overcome the trauma. Mm-hmm. What would you say is a typical outline of the treatment, and how long do you think it takes on average with your clients to get results?
Yeah. So most of the men that come to me are ready to face it. They're ready to say, you know what? I don't want to be defined by this. I am ready to let this part of my life go, and I want to have more intimacy and connection in my relationship. A lot of the men that come to me are in relationship and they want that intimate connection with their partner. And I think that's the biggest part to how quickly we can move through it, is this desire to really kind of, let's get it out of the way and let's talk about it, let's move on, and just to be clear, I honestly, with a lot of my clients, we don't ever talk specifics about the trauma. We talk about, we move through the impact it's had on them. My coaching, I do largely mind-body coaching. So there's a great book called The Body Keeps the Score, and it talks about how trauma is stored in the body. And so it's about releasing that and moving towards, so and this is largely the difference between coaching and therapy. Therapy is around dealing with a particular emotion, wondering why, you react in a certain way, whatever. Coaching is about a goal and achieving that goal. So we set out a goal to begin with, which is largely independent of the trauma, which is, I want more connection with my partner. I want to be able to be intimate and not shut down. And so we move towards that goal as opposed to hashing out the trauma.
Right.
And from a time perspective, it can be, most of my initial program is 3 months. And I see a lot of people that get amazing results in that 3 months. Some people, it takes a little bit longer, or they may extend it for another 3 months, or extend it for another 3 months to work on something else because they had such amazing results with moving past the effect of the trauma on their intimacy.
Do you have, excuse me, do you have women in the relationship join the coaching, or is this just one-on-one?
When we're dealing specifically with trauma, that's generally one-on-one. I have had situations where couples have come to me for relationship coaching, and it's been uncovered that there was trauma in one of them, if it's a heterosexual couple, the man's history, if it's a gay couple, one of them. And there is a lot of trauma. I do want to say that while statistically that 1 in 4, 1 in 5, 1 in 6 is prior to the age of 18, that isn't to say that adult men can't be sexually abused. They can be. And it happens, and it doesn't have to be, you hear about it a lot in homosexual relationships, but it's not unique there to that situation. Adult men can be sexually abused by adult women. It does happen. So I want to put that out there. But so it depends on the situation, honestly. I have had situations where both partners participate, and I will have sessions with him alone. But it really depends on the relationship, and it depends on the level of support that the woman is bringing to the table. Because she's going to have her own thoughts around this. And and for a lot of women, it's very conflicting because they may have an image, similar to of men being the perpetrators and not the victims. And she's going to bring her own conditioning, her own experiences to the table. And if it's not going to be productive to helping him move past it, then I would work with him individually on that issue.
I'm losing my voice, sorry.
Okay. That's why I brought water.
What message do you have for women who know or may suspect that a man they love may have been sexually abused?
Yeah, so it's a really delicate subject. So my first message to them is to tread lightly. If you suspect that it's happened, but he's never talked about it, never brought it up, then you want to be really, really careful with how you approach him. If it's someone that is hurting themselves in some way, whether it's with drug or alcohol abuse or, suicidal thoughts or just, depression, tendencies towards anger or rage, then, I would say gently talk to them. Or reach out to a professional and get some advice on that. If he has opened up about it or kind of alluded to it, I would, get permission from him first about whether he wants to talk about it. Don't push. Again, because this is so tied in with who he is as a man and his own masculinity. If you push too hard, then it could be really detrimental to the relationship or to him in general. But the other thing is to let him know that you love him regardless. This doesn't change how you see him as a man, and that he's not alone. And that's the biggest message that I have to men that have this is, I see you, I see the man you are, and you are not alone. This happens to a lot of men.
To give our audience a perspective, what would you say the number of clients you currently have or have had throughout your career that you have treated?
I only started doing this recently in the last couple of years. And I've had, probably 15 or 20 clients in the last 2 years. I limit the number of people that I see, but it's an interesting field to specialize. It's an interesting specialty. And one of the reasons why I do other things as well is just, it's so hard for men to acknowledge that this happened to them and to seek help, or to acknowledge that it had an impact on them. So many of them have buried it or changed the narrative of what happened to them to make it not be abuse, because they don't want to acknowledge that they were a victim. So I'm hoping that I help far more. I'm thinking about creating some group things and maybe retreats to help more men at once. But it's definitely so needed, and I'd love to help every man.
Yeah.
That's a lot. That's billions, and I don't have that kind of time right now.
So what message do you really want to share during our session to our audience?
Yeah, I think the biggest thing I want to share is that one, that this happens, that this is an epidemic in our country, in the world, that we just don't talk about. I mean, if 25% of men have been sexually abused at some point in their life, that's a huge number. And it's not something that we can sweep under the rug. I want to shine a light on it and acknowledge that it happens. I don't want men to suffer in silence. I want them to know that, again, like I said before, this happened to them. It doesn't define who they are, and that it's possible to move past it and have a wonderful, happy, intimate, connected life.
And how can they find you? Where, your website, your contact information?
Yeah. So the name of my company is The Warrior Core. If you go to thewarriorcore.com, there's information there on the various coaching, the various coaching programs that I offer. And this trauma healing is one of them. And from there, you can email me with questions, or you can schedule a complimentary consultation. We can start to talk through and start to unpack, everything that's happened.
And if there are men that want to ask you questions, but they kind of want to remain anonymous for now, is there a way to send you any type of communication?
That's interesting. So I do there's a contact me. And unfortunately, the web platform that, no, wait, I have to check on this. I'm pretty sure that the web platform doesn't allow just first name or first name and last name. You can make up a name, make up an email, create an email that's just for this, make up a name, tell me in there that, you want to remain anonymous. And it is anonymous. So the one client that I did discuss earlier, he's given me permission to talk about what's happened to him. I would never use his name. I do not give specifics where he lives, any of that. So I do want to say that I hold confidentiality as an extremely important value, in both personally and in my business. And I would never share anything about anyone without their permission.
Now, with Shine with Courage, we have a mentorship program. Do you have anything like that you can partner men with other men that have gone through therapy and have recovered?
Yeah, so there are organizations out there that do that. I haven't done that yet, largely because most of my clients have been all over the world, from all over the world. And so getting them together in one place is challenging. But that is definitely something, as I move forward with the Warrior Core specifically. I've kind of put a lot of things on hold with the current condition. Most of my work with men is in person. And so obviously we can't do that right now. But when we can, again, I do want to start like a small group, which I could do virtually, and definitely some in-person stuff that will help men support each other, because that's actually part of my larger work within the Warrior Core, which is this idea that men don't seek support from each other in meaningful and deep ways. And I'd like to shift that, but I certainly would love to bring men together who can support each other in the knowledge that they are not alone and that they are all survivors. And I would love to set up a mentor program.
Awesome.
Yeah.
And with my lady talk, I was doing it in person, which, like you said, we can't do that right now when you're in the New York City area.
Mm-hmm.
So once we are back to a stable environment, I definitely plan on coming down there for Lady Talk panel events, and I would love to have one focused on men as well, because I'm sure we have other resources in the area as well. So I'm very excited about partnering up with you.
Great. I would love that.
Is there any other information you want to share with our audience?
I think what I'm hoping more than anything that people take away from this is, if you were not a victim, just the knowledge that this happens, and it's so much more prevalent than anyone ever talks about. And if you were a victim, that you are not alone, and to please reach out, if not to me, to someone else, and get some help, because there is a light on the other at the other end, and life can be so much better when you move past this.
Definitely. Thank you so much for joining me and being here on my important mission of, promoting this organization and promoting you and what you do. You're very important to the society, and I'm very excited to be working with you.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me, and thank you so much for giving me the platform to get this out there and to shine some light on this topic that has been largely ignored for forever. Yeah, so thank you.
And I'll be doing more Lady Talk series episodes. So if you're interested in me interviewing you and promoting your brand, or if you have any questions, please contact me, shinewithcourage@gmail.com, or you can go to my website, shinewithcourage.org. Thank you so much for your time.